exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Hey, Tim. Since tonight's show is about remote viewing, didn't you used to know Ingo Swann?
Well, we had lunch together a few times, but I didn't know him in a biblical sense.
Oh, well, that's good, but did you ever learn anything from him?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I learned. I learned not to eat the meatball heroes at Miss K's. Talk about indigestion.
I thought it was John Keel who taught you that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't know if Ingo even ate meat. Not that there was much meat in those meatballs. But anyway, Tim, can you help me with this remote viewing I'm trying to do?
Me? I don't think so. I haven't been trained. I wouldn't even know where to start.
What's to know? Just put some new batteries in this remote control for me, will you? I want to watch the Yankee game.
Oh, that kind of remote viewing. Well, okay, you can't watch the game now. We have a new episode of Exploring the Bizarre getting ready to start.
Well, set the VCR for me so I can remote view the game later, will you?
No time. Tina is teleporting us to the KCR studios right now.
Oh, jeez, I'll never get to watch the game. Yo, Yankees, go.
I hate when Tina does that.
I'll have to remote view it from my seat here in my office area. They were ahead by, I think, 6 or 7 runs. You know, Tim, we just heard some rather sad news. You know, I'm always up on synchronicities. I mean, it seems like I'm stuck in the matrix here, or whatever. I've even written a 450-page book about Philip K. Dick and all my synchronicities. I mean, there's just tons of them, and we're not talking about somebody thinking of you and they call on the phone the next day or something. That I mean, we're talking about hardcore stuff. Anyway, a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with my friend Helen Holovey, who helped me on the book about David Bowie and Wally Elmark about witchcraft in New York and the rock music in the early 1970s. And she had found some really great photographs of Dr. John the Night Tripper, who was like the king of New Orleans funk music, Dixieland. I don't know exactly how you describe it, but he was a number one. Anyway, I suggested to Helen that she get in touch with Dr. John's management, and maybe they could do something with the photographs, because these were extreme close-up pictures. He had come over to my occult center with all his, his headdress, voodoo headdress on, and the makeup, and he bought all his oils and candles and incense and the whole bit. And we talked New Orleans Grigri, for a while. And I've run into him a couple of times over the years. Unfortunately, the doctor passed away from a heart attack on June 6th, which is very, very unfortunate. But and we'll certainly miss him. We had a couple of really good conversations. I had seen him perform for the first time. I think it was back in probably 1969. It was at a Randall's Island festival that had been taken over by the Black Panthers.
Oh my gosh!
So it was a free concert. But Jimi Hendrix was on the program and Dr. John, and I was sitting in the field there. I admit, kind of looped out on whatever psychedelics was coming by on that day. And here he is, all garbed out with his mojo stick and his headdress and the whole bit. And the lights are down low and colored lights and all. And he comes in and he sprinkles the gree dust all over the audience with his backup singers, the whole bit. It was an experience to behold. Now, in later times, he didn't go into the motif all that much. He kind of was subdued as far as that goes. But we got some really good close-up photos of the doctor. But unfortunately, he's not in the house any longer because he passed away. And we will miss him, and we will miss his unique brand of music. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and you've got a picture of him in his full headgear in your book, David Bowie, Witchcraft, UFOs,
Yeah.
Cocaine and Paranoia.
No, yeah, that's true. And in fact, the management, Dr. John's management, has indicated that they're going to try to get one of Helen's photos on the cover of a major music magazine that is planning to do a retrospective story on Dr. John. So, Dr. John, wherever you are, we bless you, man, and we loved your entertainment. And there you go.
All right. Well, let's. I think we need to go ahead and get on with the show then, Tim. And we've got a absolutely fantastic guest tonight. We have John Vivanco. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, John. Vivanco.
Vivanco. It's close enough.
There you go. Well, now John is author, speaker, instructor of the remote viewing method, transdimensional systems. He's an investigator, and he's been remote viewing and teaching students for over 20 years. Now, he was part of the first civilian remote viewing organizations after the government declassified the program, and his organization was hired to investigate the unknown, including work with the FBI after 9/11 on counter-terror issues and with corporations on business issues. Now, his searches for lost treasures have led him to collaborating with the National Geographic Channel and continues to this day developing ideas around television, teaching, investigating, and running a team of remote viewers on several exciting projects. Now, John is also the author of the book, The Time Before the Secret Words, On the Path of Remote Viewing, High Strangeness, and Zen. So, John, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. You guys are the best.
Oh, God bless you, man. Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, I would suppose, obviously, I have a question. I'm the co-host, but I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with remote viewing. It's gotten a lot of publicity in recent times. But give us just a paragraph what remote viewing is and how it differs, let's say, from out-of-body projection or any of the other traveling modes where you can see things at a distance.
Yeah, remote viewing, it's really a very, very controlled way to use clairvoyance or ESP. It's really a protocol or a methodology that someone's trained in, and they use it in order to perceive people, places, objects, or events located elsewhere from them in time and space. We call it non-local information. The past and the future have no bearing on being able to remote view something, nor does distance or any amount of time. So, essentially you could remote view something or someone down the street from you in one session. The other, you could be viewing some civilization across the universe or something even in the distant past of Earth. So it's this methodology that was created specifically by our intelligence services in order to just turn psychics into spies. And where it differs from the out-of-body experiences or astral projection is that remote viewing is more of this inward psychic functioning where you receive sensations across the board. You don't go into this full separation from body and have visuals like a movie playing out in your head. You have these almost subtle sensations coming through you that you're writing down within a very controlled structure. And we, as remote viewers, we never know. One of the big things about this is we never know what we're going to be tasked to remote view. We're kept blind to that, so we can't make things up. So it can be a really visceral experience. You can have the visuals, but you're typically within your body. You're grounded, in your seat because you're writing on paper. And you're not, slipping out into another world unless you have this bilocation experience, which
bilocation, right?
yeah, bilocation,
Yeah.
which would be a little bit more akin to sort of an astral projection, but not quite. It's getting towards that, but it's not quite there, because you have, you're fully aware of your body and writing things down, and at the same time, you are in this scene, having visuals, slight little movie scene play out where you have limited movement, and you kind of flip into that scene, and then you'll pop back into your body and write that stuff down. But then, the next stuff you get in a session after that will be, subtle sensations. Maybe you'll hear something or smell something, or just sense textures or have a general knowingness. So it's really a lot of it's your whole body mind complex that is reaching out and sort of feeling the information.
Yeah, well, I remember back in the I guess it was the late '60s or early '70s, when I was involved in the music scene. Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead that was involved in some remote viewing, but I don't think they called it that, at Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, where they had him in one room and somebody else in the other, and they were trying to pass information from one room to the other. And I think Dr. Stanley Krippner was involved in that. He's still active in the parapsychology today. He's out in the West Coast, but I don't remember the exact results, except that they said that I think that it was fairly successful. So the Grateful Dead was into this, but I don't think the terminology was remote viewing in those days. But how did you come across this? I mean, you didn't just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I want to be a remote viewer." I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's kind of like that. I don't know. I saw Ted Koppel in 1995, doing the television show Nightline, and it was the first outing of the remote viewing program, the Stargate program. So, I'm watching this, and I hear the word psychic spy, and, it's like a ping pong ball just bouncing around in my skull. I was like, psychic spy? And then they said technology, right? So when you say technology and you say psychic spy, you put those two things together, I became obsessed with it, right? So what happened was, I had never thought of myself as being psychic in any way, but, I thought, well, heck, this is something I've got to figure out because it sounds fascinating. I'd had a really strange life up to then. I, lived in a Zen center, a lot of meditation practice, had, what I come to find out later were the typical abduction type experiences when I was a child. So, maybe there was a subconscious path already forged. But I basically taught myself, I cobbled together how to do it because, back in around 95, there was not a lot online, right? There were some people that I connected with that knew about it. I think Ed Dames was already teaching it. So people were letting out little instances of how to do it, the ideogram technique and stuff like that. So I trained myself at first, and then I got formal training a couple of years after that. After I got formal training, I found out that, yeah.
What exactly is formal training? What does that mean?
Formal training is when somebody trained in the methodology of controlled remote viewing, basically how you put this stuff on paper and the whole structure that they used, that the military had developed, that is considered formal training. So, I went through actually a couple of different classes, some long ones, even a 2-week class. And my background was in fine art, and I was really a painter. And in my training in fine art, I was taught to describe how light falls on a surface, at a very basic level. And what that translated to in remote viewing is being a very physical remote viewer, because I come to find out that not a lot of people can actually represent things in a very physical way. They describe their world and what they're viewing through concepts and metaphors and simile. So there's value in a person who describes things in a very physical way, right? So because of that, I got pulled into a think tank fairly fast, a funded think tank, and I was a professional remote viewer, and then later went on to run the think tank with another person as the director of operations. So that's how I got pulled into it.
Now was this like at SRI or somewhere?
No, this was a company called Transdimensional Systems, and this was based out of Southern California. Think about this time. Remote viewing is declassified. There was an article that came out in major newspapers that stated Sony Entertainment was using remote viewers to, remote view future technology so they can patent it, right? Whatever they can do. So this got every CEO hot in the head about remote viewing. And because we were one of the few functioning think tanks out there with a group of professional viewers, we were, walking through the back door of some high-level corporations, talking to high-level people in order to help them with the same issue Sony was trying to figure out. We also, because of that, you had intelligence agencies that were interested in how civilians were developing remote viewing, and we would get tapped on by them. So we had handlers in various agencies that wanted things known, typically on the strange side. And then we also worked with the FBI on counterterror after 9/11.
Now, what were you asked to do, or what were you looking to do with the remote viewing? I mean, any specifics on this?
Well, for corporations, for one thing, it spanned from technology to financial, even
corporate spying. Corporate spying.
We never did corporate espionage. No, that was one thing that we wouldn't do. That we had some ethical standards. Yeah. But we would look at future the way the stock market's going to go, or if two companies were going to merge, right? So we would look at future events like that and advise financial companies on that kind of stuff. We worked with a company. In fact, I can even say this. They had given permission for me to talk about it. A company named Catalyst Entertainment, who they were an amusement park company, and they were building an amusement park. Actually, it was about an amusement park based on UFOs in China, Suzhou, China. So they were an American company. They had a Chinese businessman help them run through all of the hoops that they got to run through in China to build these things. And they dumped about $20 million into building this. And the Chinese businessman took off with $14 million of their dollars. So they took him to court in the U.S. They won. They had private detectives. The FBI had even gotten involved trying to find this guy. They couldn't find him. So, as a last resort, which it seems that we always are, they contacted us. So we actually found him. We tracked him down, found him in Australia, and led the investigators to him and brought him to the negotiating table. So, I mean, that's an instance of it really working out well. We also worked with so on these, on the intelligence side, nobody wants a paper trail. So we were often shuttled through the back door. And no papers, no documentation. In fact, they wouldn't even ask us, or they wouldn't tell us directly what they wanted to know. They would just say, well, we have a problem with some scientists and we think they're doing something that, might not turn out so well. So can you remote view that problem and let us know how it goes? So, we'd have to figure out how to get data on that kind of stuff and report back to them. Kind of interesting situations there. Now, with the FBI, it was all future terrorist attacks on U.S. soil that we were looking at.
And did you see any future terrorist attacks?
Well, back then, just after 9/11, it was, the way we got pulled in was when the Twin Towers had collapsed, they were concerned initially about the retaining wall, that if it were breached in that deep basement, it could potentially let in the river into lower Manhattan, completely flood out lower Manhattan. So they couldn't get anyone down there. And this was, I think, a day or two after they fell. They asked us if we'd remote view the integrity of the structure. And, we came back and it looked fine. So we gave them our data. We told them looked great and doesn't look breached, compromised in any way. And about a week or two later, they were able to get people down there and confirm our data. So that led us into, well, they asked specifically if we wanted to hunt for bin Laden, right? When we said no thanks, we didn't want to do that. Mainly, I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracy stories around it, but I won't go into that. We initially didn't want to have errant bombs dropped on anybody. If our data helped them help them get to a location. We didn't want that to be on our heads, killing anybody that was innocent. So we declined that, and we said, but we would work counter-terror on U.S. soil on future terrorist attacks. So that was interesting.
Did the FBI take this seriously?
They took it seriously enough to actually. Well, so in let's see. I can't remember. It was either Times Square or Madison Square Garden subway. There, we saw a scenario where biological and/or chemical gases would be dropped through a vent. So the FBI had us go after that vent, completely describe it, find out exactly where it was, and they actually boarded that vent up. So we do know that they acted on some of our data. I have no idea. I mean, I'm guessing that they back it up with other intelligence. We don't sit down and have tea time with them, so they don't tell us much of anything.
They don't, not too much feedback from them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I got you. They're keeping it under the bulletproof vest, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So that was good to know that at least they acted on some of it, and some of it was accurate. Otherwise, we'd never know.
Well, what would you say your accuracy rate is?
That really depends.
Can't tell, right?
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of this stuff that we do, and we give it to clients, and then we basically lose contact with them, or it's classified. We have no way to know. But when we do work with corporations, it's usually probably up in the 75, 80 percentile.
All right, I need to interrupt you because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, we will continue our show about remote viewing. So stay tuned.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking about remote viewing with John Vivanco. And John, I wanted to ask you, I'd seen a video where you were being interviewed, and I found this very interesting, where you were talking about some of your corporate clients. And you were saying that after you went through the business that they had originally hired you for, that afterwards, all they wanted to talk about was another subject.
Right.
And do you know what I'm talking? You know what I'm referring to here? Okay. Well, I won't say anymore. I'll let you go into it then. I just found that interesting because it's one of those subjects that a lot of people are interested in, but they're not going to reveal it on the surface, or they're going to wait till
Yeah,
the doors are
exactly.
the doors are closed and the lights are turned out.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, first off, we were always this backdoor deal, and we would typically work with CEOs because they didn't want anyone else in the company to know they were working with us. So they felt safe from that standpoint. And it was basically, we'd do a bunch of work for them. We'd meet up and go through the data and explain our recommendations and whatnot, and then go out to dinner. And it was always, 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 tell me about aliens. Tell me about UFOs. Are there really things on Mars and the Moon? How long have they been here? What are they doing here? How many of them are there? So that's what it was. And, we'd have these conversations that would go way into the night with nearly every single client, even for days. Let's meet up so we can talk about UFOs. So yeah, that is really fascinating because I think that's where most people are with it. They want to know about it. See, when you're dealing with somebody, you're giving them remote viewing data and it turns out to be true for their business.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to believe you when you talk about aliens and UFOs and the projects you do on those. And so what I do now is I use that methodology of working like with corporations or intelligence. We use multiple remote viewers and never a single remote viewer on any project. And we look at areas of high strangeness. We look at UFO incidents. We look at Mars. We look at the moon. And we build projects, sometimes do videos, and do expeditions to these locations where strange things are happening, to further get more understanding, deeper understanding, more data in the form of film if we can when we do this. So yeah, it's really, I think, what most people want to know about when you get right down to it.
Now, have you had anybody approach you, whether it be, corporations or even government agencies, and say, can you remote view me some kind of technology that we can use, alien technology or whatever that we can use, make ourselves rich, or use for military purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. So one particular person wanted us to. So the gray alien, the typical gray with the big eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was thought that there's an eye skin or a skin over their eye that is night vision, basically.
Right.
And when that's removed, they have more or less pupils, like humans would, obviously larger. But so that was a project that we worked on once for a person who, owns a eyeglass company, so that he could create those. So that's one example. We have worked with people that are more on the science development side. When you think of projects like what DARPA does, that have asked us to help them in different types of technologies that are from craft, basically alien craft, very fine tuning of things, which is bizarre when you get down to it. And you have somebody in a government agency that's wanting this kind of information from civilians, but then again, there's no paper trail on it, and we can. It won't lead back anywhere, which is the other half of this. We have also looked at concerns with Antarctica at the request of an agency, and something that potentially could go wrong down there, that could create a situation where our ionosphere has deep, deep problems. And this has to do with technologies that are being worked on in secret down in that area, that are basically out of control. We also have an experiment that was going on with the super collider, and something happened in this experiment where dimensions, and they did this because they could do it, not because they should do it. It was a very big concern where our dimension had kind of squeezed into another one or another timeline, a dimensional timeline, and was causing issues. So, I mean, this is stuff that's way outside of the realm of what most people would even think our government would be getting involved in. I mean, we're actually talking government. We're talking more on the side of dark projects.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Well, okay. Now, so I could imagine then that the people that you have working for you that are doing these, remote viewings, probably considering, okay, say like the what you were talking about, the Large Hadron Collider, them trying to come up with a way to describe what they're seeing, because I know that they go into this cold, and
Right.
so I mean, when they're trying to describe these kinds of really very esoteric and probably for a lot of them just completely outside of their understanding, how would they go about describing what they are seeing?
Yeah, the way that we work remote viewing was different than the military worked it. So we allowed remote viewers in the military. What they did was they pushed viewers to describe very physically. And so
Right.
that really leaves them in the realm of three-dimensional physical reality and explaining that stuff. And if they don't have vocabulary for it, then it's not going to work very well. So with our viewers, what we did was we allowed them to describe things metaphorically and conceptually and build it out that way
Mm-hmm.
when they are confronted with things they don't understand. Because when you're in a session and you're getting things that are outside of your wheelhouse there, you're going to feel it, you're going to know it. So at that point, what the viewers would do would begin to speak of it in metaphor and concepts. And when we did that, we were able to actually build even more accurate pictures of things, especially in the unknown realm, because it allows for this looser and broader way to explain things. So we drifted off from this, super rigid, stylistic military method and began to work the methodology in a different way. And this is actually the reason why we were approached so much, was because we shifted it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before they were just stuck in the physical zone. And you have to think these guys were in the military. We're mostly viewing compounds and structures. And so it made sense. But now, we're off in this world, in the civilian world, where everybody wants to know mysteries, these mysteries that have been plaguing us for years, and root them out. So, you really have to take a different tact.
One of the videos that you have on your website, which for our audience is on Exploring the Bizarre's website, so you can go there and visit John's site. You went into checking out what was called the Skinny Bob video. Now, for our audience who aren't familiar with that, there was I think it was several videos that came out. It's been a few years now that seemingly showed, and I think it was supposed to have been taken like in Russia, the typical like a gray alien creatures. There was like a brief shot of a UFO, and then several like panning up and down shots of this alien that was just referred to as Skinny Bob. Most people think it's a hoax. It looks like like bad CGI, and I think that's what possibly you were thinking about when you went into looking at it. But the results that your team got were rather surprising.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I mean, I thought it was probably CGI or fake, something before we viewed it. Yeah, I mean, all the data came back, and it was a real being, real creature. They were describing a gray alien. They were describing it, sort of frog-like and strange, suffering as it was, kept captive. It was kept in this, or had this sort of like rubber pool that it was in with liquid in it, and I guess it could have been nutrients, or it could have been this I don't know, somewhat safe place for it to be. And one thing that was really interesting was that as we were viewing it, so, the first viewers in, I'd say the first 3-ish times into Remote View Skinny Bob, the viewers do something called a consciousness map. And that basically is something that we do to get to know the mind of the subject a little better. So this doesn't normally happen. But this subject, Skinny Bob, was basically telling the remote viewers, and they're writing this down as they're receiving the information, okay, you're starting to bother me. It's time for you to go. Leave me alone. Why do you keep bugging me? So this started to ramp up. It started to happen. And then we couldn't view him anymore. He blocked it. The viewers would get sent to this, a boat floating on a lake scene or something like that. And that was it. It was done. Couldn't view him anymore. And, this is the other interesting thing, too, is that I knew because of that we were the first remote viewers in to view this particular case. Because if other viewers had already viewed it, we would have been kicked out right at the beginning. Right. And, this happens. This happens when you remote view beings that have this broader consciousness where they can block you, or they can come visit you. You poke them, they'll poke you back,
Well, now, it's funny that you should say that, because I remember that the late Ingo Swann wrote about an experience that he had when he had been tasked to check out the far side of the moon. And he said that he saw alien beings working there, and that they became aware of him viewing them, and it startled him and frightened him somewhat.
And you know what? I had pretty much the exact same experience. I was tasked on a crater. What is the crater's name? Aristarchus, something like that. I'm massacring the name. I know it. This one crater that has a particular blue glow to it. There's some photographs with just glowing blue. So I was blind, tasked on this crater. I literally had a bilocation experience. And this happens, for whatever reason, this happens to other remote viewers as well, where remote viewers have more of a chance of a bilocation experience when they view things that are off planet. Could have something to do with all the psychic energy here. I don't know. But so I had a bilocation experience when I viewed that. I was at my desk remote viewing, but then I popped into the scene where in front of me was this large rocky wall, and in the wall was this huge metal door. It looked like an airlock door. And I could see, I had limited movement, and I could see up the top of the crater. I realized that I was not on the Earth at that moment. And I moved my head and I looked away from the wall, and this would be the crater wall, towards the middle of it. And there were these beings that looked like they had skin like a caper. And they were out in this crater moving stuff around, doing stuff. And when I looked at them, they stopped and looked at me. Oh. And I got this vibe like, you're busted. And I was out, and I ended the session, and I just like turned on The Price is Right or something and pretended I never even went there.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I mean, you were talking about how they can follow you back and remote view you. I mean, was that a concern?
Yeah, absolutely was a concern. Absolutely. I mean, at that point, I had another experience before that where I was actually visited by some alien, like literally physically, they came I mean, it sounds absolutely insane, but we had been working on a project. We were working with Ruben Uriarte, MUFON director in California, and Joyce Murphy. They had a TV show called Beyond Boundaries. And they asked us if we would remote view where they could film the Chupacabra because they were going to Puerto Rico and doing an episode out there. And they also wanted this other thing remote viewed, which were these lights that the locals were seeing in the sky around the Arecibo radio telescope. So I was the first viewer in on that project where we were remote viewing the lights. And I was blind to it, so I didn't know what I was viewing until I started viewing it. And so these beings were coming down. They were coming into the forest. They were associated with this signal that Arecibo radio telescope, we found out later, was actually picking up and knew that it was intelligence. So aside from that, they were going into the jungle. When I was viewing it, they noticed me. And I remember in that session, I just kept saying, they're coming, they're coming, they're going to visit me. And it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't like a month later, I was woken up in the middle of the night by this hand pushing on my shoulder. And I grabbed the hand and it pulled away from me. It was slick and bumpy. And when I realized that this hand felt weird, I sat up, opened my eyes, and I'd say about 5 feet in front of me is this thing. It's got this head that's shaped like a football on its side. It's got two little eyes on the outer edges of the football. And it's got all these bumps, like if you'd call it a chin under its chin. And then it had these just spindly limbs hanging down. And I'd say it wasn't any more than 3 feet tall. It was brownish with sort of dark brownish splotches all over it. And I flipped out. I completely flipped out. I started backing up in bed. I had like the adrenaline rushing through me like you wouldn't believe. And I was starting to scream. I was like, what is this thing? This was not like your typical gray. This was not like anything. There was nothing like that in any UFO literature that I'd ever heard of or read about. And so as I was freaking out, it basically said to me telepathically into my head, stop what you're doing. It's like you're throwing rocks at me. Yeah. So, it was like all the emotions that I had were affecting it. So I calmed down a bit and it said, we're from the signal. And that was we called that the project that we were working on, the signal. And we're from the signal. And we want to help you and we want you to help us. So that, I didn't say anything to the other viewers, but then after that, another viewer was visited the same way. And then another viewer was visited the same way. So at that point, we started to dig into what the heck was going on and what they wanted because they were around. And so they started showing up more after that. And they were interested in a species on this planet that they were genetically related to, which was a firefly.
Oh I mean,
this is just this. So they were concerned about a specific species of firefly called Pteroptyx tenor that all flashes in unison in Malaysia. And these are, they are only in two places on Earth, in the Amazon and in Malaysia. They wanted us to help save the environment because it was being destroyed and they were going to go extinct because they were genetically related to them. And they had said also that, we didn't come here for humans. We want nothing to do with humans. We were just going to them, but you stepped in the way and we thought it was interesting. So can you help us?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. Unfortunately, we've only got about 4.5 or really about 3.5 minutes left in the show, but I wanted to get this question in from one of our listeners. Larry on Twitter wants to know if any of you from your group has gotten in trouble from an agency for remote viewing something that you weren't supposed to remote view, like maybe the White House or Area 51 or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. It's happened a number of times. I'd say about 3 times at least. we've been warned. Well, we had death threats for one thing by a covert agency. So on the one hand, we were working with handlers and certain agencies, and there was another agency that would basically give us death threats, trying to shut us down. So yeah, one time we inadvertently remote viewed the stealth fighter when it was classified.
Mm-hmm.
So it had been declassified, but we remote viewed actually the classified project. But it was declassified when we remote viewed it. But you still can't go in and remote view the classified parts. We found out because what happened later on that night is two or three of the remote viewers were buzzed by a triangle UFO coming over their house, very low. And basically the way they described it was that it was like this sound that just generated immense fear came just shooting out of this craft, and it was very directed at them. And then after that, it was a phone call that we shouldn't be remote viewing that stuff. So yeah, it happens. And so we're very careful with anything classified. Don't do it. We don't do it.
All right. Listen, 2 minutes left in the show. So why don't you let our audience know where your website, where they can find out more about you, and where they can get a copy of your book.
Yeah, my website is righthemispheric.com, and I do a lot of training. I will do projects and release those in video form, or and just writing about them on the website. And you can find my book on Amazon, The Time Before the Secret Words. Easy to find. Just search for it. It should be there.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much. Great having you on tonight. Very fascinating.
I appreciate you guys. I really love your show. And
I'm
honored to be with you.
Yeah, pass the word, man. Pass the word. And don't forget to tune into our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO Secret Files, with some great cartoon animation. You and I are featured as cartoon characters now, Tim. We can't get away from this, I guess.
Us and SpongeBob SquarePants.
There you go. Okay. Well, rock and roll, Dr. John. We miss you very much.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.